Hi guys, so this is the short video lecture on variation. And what I have here is just a very short document that's also attached to this content module. And this is a few pages of one of my books. And what I've done is I've highlighted alternating sentences, yellow and teal. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to just kind of talk about variation and show you some examples from this piece. But what I want you to do is I want you to, watch the video, but then read through this. And as strange as it may sound, I want you to try to listen to the words as you read them. You should actually read it aloud. Everything, when you're proofreading, anything that you write, you should read it aloud because you'll hear repetitions, you'll hear awkwardness, and you'll hear the rhythm of it. You'll be able to hear if you need to vary more or not. Um, there's, and this might be a strange concept to think about, but there's a theory about musicality in writing, is what it's called. And there's definitely a musicality in effective writing. Just like in songwriting, in music, writing requires rhythm, and the rhythm helps keep the reader engaged. If your sentence structure and sentence length is repetitive, um, the monotony of it will distract the reader, and you never want to distract the reader. If you distract the reader, you lose them, and then your writing's not as effective. Um, and this is Variation is everything from paragraph length to sentence length to the sentence structure. For example, you never want to begin, um, you know, you want to vary the way you structure your sentences. You don't want to begin every sentence with the noun, I did this, I did that, she did this, she did that. You want to vary uh, the subject and predicate of your sentences. You also want to vary the length of your sentences. And you want to vary your word choice. You should never use the same word um, in the same two or three sentences, because that repetition of that word can distract the reader. Um, and you want to vary where you build in pauses. Whenever there's punctuation, there's an inherent pause in writing. That's the purpose of punctuation, is to build in pauses. So you want to think about every single comma, every piece of punctuation that you use. All right, so we're going to look through this. So you'll notice just right here that the first paragraph is only one sentence long. This is a very effective strategy in that one sentence paragraphs or even one word paragraphs um, resonate with the reader. If there's something that you want the reader to pause on and think about, at the end of every paragraph, there's typically a pause as well. So if you want the reader to really think about something, put it in a one sentence paragraph. Um, so here we have one sentence paragraph, and notice that's also a short sentence, which is in the dream I'm always drowning. The next paragraph, and also notice here that it doesn't begin with I'm always drowning in the dream. So the sentences actually vary from this one to the next one. All right, so we have in the dream I am always drowning. I had it again last night. Pause at the comma. And it's all I think about is Frank Archer rambles on about a missed deadline for a new mobile heart rate application he's been working on. Pause at the next comma while I wait for my coffee to finish brewing. So here we have a one sentence paragraph and then a longer paragraph, but also this one sentence is very short, and then we have a longer sentence. I'm not going to read this whole thing to you, but I just want you to notice that there's a longer sentence, shorter sentence, another shorter sentence, then a longer one, then a longer one. So just looking at this page here, and then we have a very short sentence, and then two longer ones. So you don't have to vary necessarily. You don't need to have one long sentence, one short sentence, one long sentence, one short sentence. You want there to be variation. But there are times when you want to use longer sentences and times when you want to use shorter sentences. Often longer sentences work very well with when you're describing something, when you're building imagery. Shorter sentences typically work better when you're using action. But it's also important to keep variation in mind. So here, this sentence obviously there's a lot of narration and description in this, while there's also a lot of action. So I had the dream again last night. It's all I think about as Frank rambles on while I wait for my coffee. So there's a lot of action in this. But it's important to keep the sentence length and sentence structure variation in mind. And then next, here's a very short sentence that is mostly action. And then a short sentence that's description. So you don't necessarily have to, you always use long sentences when you're describing something and using imagery, but you want there to be a rich variation, a rich combination of short sentences and longer sentences. A repetition of short sentences, of very short declarative sentences, the repetition of the pauses at the end of each sentence actually creates a sense of anxiety and tension in the reader. So if you are trying to build up to a very tense moment in your story, or there's a lot of action, or it's a very tense scene, or if you're even trying to use imagery that's disturbing to the reader, you might want to build it in a series of very short sentences. Psychologically, the abruptness and the repetition of those pauses causes us to feel almost anxious, unsettled even. So here's going back to variation, here's a long, this isn't a long paragraph, but it's definitely longer than this next one. And notice the number of sentences in each paragraph. So this one has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then this one's only three sentences. The next, this is a very descriptive paragraph that details a dream, and this is a longer paragraph. And notice that there are several fairly long sentences in this. And you'll become more familiar and comfortable with variation as you practice it more. And I've kind of figured out what works for me. So my standard variation, as you can see, is, here's a long sentence, and then maybe 2 or 3, well, here there's 4 short ones, but this is one of those instances where I'm trying to create tension in the reader. I'm trying to build up in this scene, which is describing a dream, that something bad is happening. So here's a series of shorter sentences, and then I break it up with a longer one. Then there's 2, 3, or 4. There's 4 short ones, longer one. So this is here. And then here we're getting to a moment that's meant to be tense. So this is a lot of moving pieces to keep in mind. And it's really important that you do this. Like I said at the beginning of this video, you should always read everything you write aloud, and it will help you find the variation, and to work on the variation, to figure out what you need to change. I suggest that you read this aloud, actually. And the short stories that you're going to read this week by DeLillo and Hemingway are wildly different in style. I would suggest that you read those aloud as well, because you will hear the way that each author manipulates variation in a different way. But going through the rest of this, so you can just kind of see that, like here's a short sentence, and here's a pretty long one, a couple shorter ones, and you can see the variation in the length of paragraphs, which is also very important. Here's another one-sentence paragraph that is meant to force the reader to pause and think about what I'm telling them. Here, this is a very tense moment. See, these sentences are only a few words long, and then there's a longer one, another short one. So, attached to this content module is this document. Read through it, read it aloud, look at the variation, and this is something I want you guys to be consciously practicing and thinking about as you begin, writing more throughout this course. This is something that you're going to have to practice, and this is one of the key skills, probably, arguably the most important skill from this class that I want you to take away from, because this is something you will use in every piece of writing that you write in college and in your career. Um, you always want to be effective at writing and at conveying your message, and you want the reader to always be engaged and captivated. You never want to bore the reader or distract the reader, and this is a very the most effective way to keep them engaged in the act of reading what you have written.